Welcome to the Couple Money Podcast. If you're looking to become financially free together, this is your show. Here's your host, El Martinez.
Even though we'd like to think of the future as bright and full of endless potential, there are times when we have to step back and prepare for the bad. Like building an emergency fund, we hope we never have to use it, but if it comes up, we have some peace of mind. Estate planning can be the same way. No one is excited to do it, but once you have things in place, you'll have some relief knowing you'll have made things easier for your loved ones should something happen to you. Certified financial planner Katie Brewer comes on the show to help me out. We'll be discussing why you should have an estate plan and the essential documents you'll need, finding guardians for your children, and how to protect your finances so that they'll help your loved ones during this difficult time. I hope you save the show so you can have a handy reference when you two sit down and talk about your plans. Katie Brewer is founder of Your Richest Life. Her practice specializes in helping members of generations X and Y create and reach their financial goals. She's also a wife and mother, so she understands how easy it can be to put off estate planning.
Probably never going to be on the top of the list until you decide that you're going to make a deadline for yourself to get it done. This is not fun. It's not really designed to be fun. But it's something that if you think about, things that are urgent and then things that are important, like estate planning and actually financial planning in general, are things that are really important to do, but there's no urgency on doing them. Like there's no deadline, there's no nagging thing to get it done. But it's something that oh my gosh, if something happened to me tomorrow, if I were in Costa Rica, which is one of my favorite places, by the way, and I was ziplining because I love doing that kind of stuff. And, the zip line breaks, my husband and I pass away. We need to have something figured out so that we don't put that on our family to figure out what the heck to do with my daughter.
If you're a parent, you know how vital it is to get this planning done. As Katie pointed out, you don't want your family struggling during this chaotic time. But estate planning is something everyone should consider doing.
I actually have single clients that aren't married and don't have kids, and they still need some documents in place. There are some living documents that specify what would happen to you if, you got really sick and you were in a coma, what should happen to you? There's a document that covers that. Same type of deal. If you were to get into a coma, don't you want somebody to be able to pay your bills while you're not able to jump on the computer and pay your bills? So even people that don't have kids and aren't married should have basic estate planning documents in place in case anything ever happens to them that they become incapacitated or unable to make decisions or do day-to-day activities on their own. And it's not necessarily something that you just hand over to the doctor and you're like, here, it's in writing. But it's something that a lot of estate planning is kind of clarifying things so that your family members don't have to try to figure it out. You don't want them to have to play sleuth and try to figure out what would this person have wanted done. It's better to just actually leave them instructions. Here's my instructions. This is exactly what I want done. I tell people yeah, this is on you, but it's really not for you. you're either going to be gone or you're going to be in the coma where you don't have any idea what's going on. All of this stuff is really for the clarification of your family members and for the benefit of your kids if you have kids.
Besides getting a will done, there are some necessary documents you need to have ready should you become incapacitated. And these aren't something you can draft up spur of the moment. You have to carefully consider your options so your wishes will more likely be respected.
So every person should have those living documents, which is a power of attorney. And there's usually a healthcare power of attorney. So that's what covers the, what will happen to me if I can't make my own healthcare decisions. And then a living will, and they're called a couple different things, different places. But the living will is that end of life document. It says, if I'm really close to the end, I mean, it essentially says pull the plug or don't pull the plug. Pretty basic document, but it's something that, a lot of people don't have. And then you can also do a power of attorney for your finances, which allows somebody else to be able to catch the ball and keep running with it if you can't pay your bills for a certain amount of time or anything like that. The will is actually something that covers if you're not around anymore. So that's the one that's kind of it's relevant if you're not around to give instructions on what you want done afterwards.
While you can find templates for these documents online for free or at a really low cost, you have to weigh the pros and cons before you fill out the forms. As simple as it may seem, there are some problems with the do-it-yourself will.
I always encourage people that something is better than nothing. But with estate planning, I mean, if you're doing this, you might as well be doing it correctly. And unless you are actually an attorney who is familiar with the probate processes in your state, because each state is different, of course, you probably have no idea what you're filling out or if it's actually going to pass muster if something happened to you. So I almost liken it to trying to drive when you're 12 years old and you've never taken a driving lesson. You probably don't want to do that. It's kind of the same as printing a will off and being filling in this, filling in that. I mean, it's better than nothing. So
yes,
if you're I have nothing now and I'm going to save up and I'm going to do documents at the end of the year, I mean, go ahead and go do something online for right now, but with the understanding that that is your stair step to actually having somebody that's knowledgeable and focuses on this area to be able to kind of lead you through these documents.
A will simplifies so many things. For those of you unfamiliar, probate can be complicated, chaotic, and stressful depending on your finances and family.
So probate is what happens if you pass away, and then there's a process to be able to kind of figure out what is going where, what assets are there, who's in charge of kind of doing things with those assets. And so if you don't have a will or anything in place, they're essentially going to try to find people that are related to you and try to split it up, in a way that seems fair. So if you're married and you don't have a will, normally they'll be okay, well, here's the spouse, and they'll probably end up with whatever it is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what is going to happen, because if you have angry family members and they want to cause a big stink about stuff, I mean, that's kind of why you put these documents into place, for the protection of your family members. You don't want to have, in my case, my husband arguing with another family member, because my other family member is oh, no, Katie actually owed me $1 million. That's not in there somewhere, And that's kind of a ridiculous example. But these types of things do come up and they do happen because money is a touchy subject. And you want to make sure that you're kind of putting those protections into place for the benefit of your family.
If you're a parent, the most important consideration you'll have is choosing the right guardians for your kids.
There's some things that you kind of need to discuss before you actually go in to talk to an attorney. So if you have kids, you want to make sure that you decide who is going to be the guardian of your kids if you pass away. And so that would be the person that actually raises them. I have friends that are oh, that would be the godparents. If you don't have people that are godparents, this would be who you think would be the best person to raise your child. And that person doesn't necessarily have to be the finance person. So this is something where a lot of people are really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You can specify somebody that will be a good caretaker and kind of raise your kids according to your values. And then you could specify somebody completely different that's in charge of the finances for your kids. So if, for example, your mom is really great with your kids and you think, she would be okay raising them, but, she's horrible with money, but your sister's really great with money, you can always set these things up to kind of do it that way. But those are things that you probably want to talk about before you step foot into an attorney's office and start if there's two of you.
Yes.
And you're like, no, what? Your sister would be horrible. And I always thought it would be my mom. Like, you probably want to have those discussions before you actually sit down and chat with an attorney.
Once you've chosen your guardian or guardians, check in to make sure they are willing to step up to the responsibility if needed. You never want someone to get that news after you've passed. And from time to time, circumstances can change drastically.
Well, and you want to make sure you revisit that every once in a while, because you might have put down, a guardian that was a friend of yours that lived right down the street, and then they decided to move across the country.
Yeah.
And, you didn't really want your kid to have to change schools and move across the country.
And please don't take it personally if they tell you they don't think they can do it. Consider it a blessing that they're being honest with you now while you still have a chance to make arrangements. You owe it to your children and your guardian to make sure that they're on board. Now, something you may not have known is that while your will takes care of some of your assets, you still have some work to get done with certain accounts like your insurance and retirement.
Getting the documents in place is really important, but you might have to do some other things as well to get everything lined up. A lot of times the will address your property, so like your house and your bank accounts and your car and your jewelry and all of that stuff. Retirement accounts usually have what's called a beneficiary. So a beneficiary there's a piece of paper that you usually fill out or something online that says, if I'm no longer here, I want this account to go to this person. Which makes it a little bit tricky because somebody might do a will and be like, woohoo, we did it. We put everything in place. But if they don't actually go change their retirement account beneficiary or their insurance beneficiary, then they might not actually have everything lined up the way they wanted to line it up. If something did happen to you, and for example, you were married before and you never took your ex-spouse off, well, guess what? That retirement account is probably going to go to your ex-spouse, even though you really didn't want to give anything to them. It doesn't really make sense. If you think about it, you're like, okay, so I go do this document and it covers, what's going to happen to me if I have health problems. It's going to cover what happens to me if I pass away. Like, I'm good to go. So that's what would make sense, but that's not actually what happens in reality.
Something you may want to consider, depending on your situation, is setting up a trust.
So a trust is different than a will because when you set up a trust, you kind of are going around probate. So if you remember, the probate process is the process of kind of taking everything to the court and saying, we have this document of the will, and this is the person who's in charge of divvying everything up. And, it's still a process. You still have to go through a process when you have a will. When you do a trust, you're kind of putting everything under that umbrella of the trust. And it's essentially a way that if people want to have more like control, your child right now is like 2 years old, and, you want to like specify, okay, I'm going to leave $1 million of life insurance, but I don't want my kid to get $1 million of life insurance when they turn 18 because, oh my gosh, that would not be a great thing. If you want to put like more things into place that happen after you pass away, that's where you might want to trust, because in a trust you can kind of put more rules essentially on like what happens to money after you're gone, and then it doesn't go through probate. So if you're somebody also who like your family doesn't want to be in the newspaper or doesn't want anything published that you passed away and that you had a court record because, you had to go through the probate process, then a trust might be a good idea to put in place. I will tack on to the end of that, that I've seen some estate planning attorneys sometimes, hopefully I don't get too much hate mail off this, but where somebody will come in for a will and then they kind of get like upsold. Like they just bought a regular hamburger and like somebody sold them a Big Mac to get a trust instead of a will. And the reason for that is because, attorneys usually can bill by time. It takes a lot more time to put a trust together than it does a will. So just know that if you go in and you're like, I just need a will and, these living documents, and somebody says, no, you definitely need a trust, they might totally be right, but make them explain to you why you need a trust instead of a will, instead of just saying, oh yeah, okay, great. Well, then I'll get this, document that might cost $2,000 or $3,000 instead of the one that was less expensive.
So if you don't know which attorney to approach, Katie has some suggestions to try out.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we will have people that we kind of know and trust in the estate planning department that we know will not fit the criteria that I just talked about, that we'll try to like upsell clients and stuff like that. So that's a good place to kind of get a referral, is from like a certified financial planner. You might also check into, a lot of employer programs will have some sort of like prepaid legal program. And sometimes with those prepaid legal programs, they'll have access to attorneys that specialize in estate planning. The advantage there is that you usually get like a discount, or there's like a group rate or something like that. So I'll usually have my clients kind of check into that as an option to find an estate planning attorney. I always tell them, like, if you find somebody and you interview them and you absolutely hate them, or like, you ask them how many estate documents that they do, and they're like, oh, you're the first one. Just because it's less expensive does not mean that you should necessarily go with it if this is the first time that person has ever put together an estate planning document. But at least that's an option for possibly finding an attorney where you might get a discount with them.
Even though it may cost you money up front to set things up, it's money well spent if your family is taken care of should something happen to you. Thanks again to Katie for being a part of this show. Please check out Your Richest Life to get more smart money tips. Join me next episode as we wrap up this second season of the podcast. Big changes are coming ahead in 2016, and I want you to be the first to know. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast so you can get that info and all the other episodes as soon as they're released. It's free and easy. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also leave a review of the show on any of those sites. I'd love to hear what you think. The feed is also available on couplemoneypodcast.com, so you can grab it on whatever service you prefer. Next week, we're also going to be beginning the top 10 episodes of the Couple Money Podcast, so you still have time to send in your votes. Tag me on Twitter and Facebook at Couple Money, leave a comment on the site, or email me. It's l@couplemoneypodcast.com. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.